Hylics is a game that doesn't make sense. Initially. That's a very key word. For example, let's look at the opening dialogue.
A tyranny luxuriously indulges the radiances. The people consider inside a radiance. It is a vent amidst a youthful season. It is a life out of luxury. Meanwhile, Jibby, king of the moon, laments a flesh. Thanks to the platinum feeling truth. Thus your story begins.
This is one of my favorite games of all time, so before we fully begin, I would just recommend that you buy it. For me, it was like $5 on Steam. Subscribe to my channel so I can take all the credit for this wonderful art piece. I've highlighted things that are important. Green being a location, blue being a thing, and yellow, cool adjectives. Gibby wants a body, and it's up to you, a random person living in the Radiances, to overthrow this king. It's a nice hook and a beginning to a hero's journey, but there's a problem. If you restart the save, the dialogue changes completely.
A lurid gland invisibly avenges the biscuits. The people castigate amidst a life. It is a peril astride a scaly apparel. It is a sort of product, besides vessel, above creature. Meanwhile, Jibby, king of the moon, rehydrates a prison with the memory mirror. Thus your story begins. Thus your story begins.
I love how absurd this game is. There are some repeating features and vague goals in mind, but I didn't even know what was going on. Just us and Gibby. Gibby! Understanding this game is like finding your bed in the middle of the night. You just have to feel your way through. LiDAR stands for light detection and ranging, and is a method used by technology to track objects via repeated pinpoints and measured distances. By shooting hundreds or thousands of lights and measuring the distance between them, you can see an object's shape. Like the opening scene, most dialogue in this game is randomized. It's absurd, weird, unintelligible, and unabashedly psychedelic. Like beams of light, they don't make sense, but with LiDAR, we can see what it is. In the next scene, you are in a house. You are Wayne. This is Wayne's house. There's a bathroom, and these weird little creatures are cats. Even though this world looks different, it's pretty similar to ours, or mine at least. My room looks exactly like this. And for me, these are the dots that give it shape. I love the soundtrack of this area. It's like a guy sitting at home just messing around on his guitar, you know, small jam session. But what's outside? Wayne lives on a beachside property. He also has a garden, so it's clear that he lives in Brighton and his house is worth $3 million. Interacting with the garden gives you vegetables, which you can eat to replenish your health. From here, you can leave. One thing I really love in this game is the setting. There's 3 tiers of worlds here: the interior, the outside, and the world map. Maybe 4 if you count the combat stages, but I feel like that's just a function. Each one has a similar movement system, but completely different themes. When you step inside buildings, you'll be exposed to a variety of different styles. Some things look like they've been drawn in paint, some out of clay, and others in both. It's worth saying that the game's lead designer / creator, Mason Lindroth, has a base in claymation. Like he's got like a little website. Some of these things were actually made and scanned in clay. It reminds me of like Final Fantasy VII, where your characters are clearly in that PS2 polygon style, but the background and items are stylized. By using multiple styles, you can create this weird overall texture that can only be experienced. Something that's like a good salad. Anyway, let's go back home and watch TV. The TV connects you and Wayne in many different ways. It's fun, it's exciting, with all these brand new different colours. Every TV shows something different. But that's important. You and Wayne can distinguish what's on the TV. You both can learn. Wayne, like you, has 2 legs, an arm, and a brain. He can understand human language. But why can't everyone else? It's because this game is biopunk and post-human. What is biopunk? Bio stands for biological and punk means punk. The bio is an aesthetic and the punk is a message. Consider steampunk. Steam refers to the primary source of power, steam, and the punk aspect is its rebellion against coal. But punk isn't just a message, it's also a style. When I said punk, you probably pictured the guy from Spider-Verse, or something close to it. Because it was initially popularized in the 1970s. That was a rebellion against authority. And in some ways, we remember it because it adheres to authority. It's a marketable and popular style. The design of Spider-Punk is said to be inspired by Basquiat, a famous postmodernist artist. This is the official Hylics death screen, and this is one of his pieces. There are lots of similarities. Both pieces use a variety of symbols and mixed media to portray their message. But what about its themes? What is it pushing against? Biology. How does this game rebel against biology? Biological engineering. This game has combat in the form of an RPG, and the lore reason for this is that it was made in RPG Maker. Combat is turn-based, where you attack through a skill, a spell, or an item, but it's only one action per character. Sometimes you'll encounter 3 enemies with their own moves, or 5. You take your turn, and then they take theirs. At first, it's nearly impossible. You will get destroyed in the worst way possible. Your skin will melt off and get flayed. But you wake up in the afterlife. Through sheer trial and error, you can fight over and over again, and when you smite these legged blockades, you get meat. Also some cash, but I feel like, imagine like fighting someone and then they just like drop like a steak from their pocket. Like that'd be crazy. In the 2000s, there was this huge debate over cloning and genetically modified organisms. Now, look, humans have always altered genetics. Thousands of years ago, when we moved from nomads to farmers, we realized that certain plants grew better at specific times of year. And then we decided to stick around with those plants, and then we realized, hey, this might be easier than hunting all the time. But recently, we've seen scientific advancements that are completely next level, such as artificial meat. We're eating vegan burgers now, but who's to say we won't grow body parts later? In this game, there are a variety of ways to power up. You can learn from televisions, buy stuff with cash, and kill enemies for meat. But when you're defeated, inevitably, you will wake up in the afterlife. In the afterlife, you can find synthesizers, where the meat you collect will be added to your health. In a literal sense, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. You can't eat the meat like the vegetables in your garden, so it's clear that something else is happening, and that something is biological engineering. Unfortunately, this is the only synthesizer you can have in the game. And what's really interesting is, when you kill other creatures, you can't find them anywhere. They don't respawn like you, and they're not in the afterlife. In this world, enemies are molded together, often mindless and monstrous, using psychic beams and mutations that you can use, and they share many human features. Only a few of them barely resemble humans, and sometimes you can recruit them. From this perspective, things make sense. There's ancient materials and relics that serve no apparent purpose to Wayne, but we know what they are. This is a car, and this is clearly a paper cup. Wayne can't understand them, but he can find a friend who does. If you bring this paper cup to a man called Desmullen,
I am an expert in the usage of the paper cup. I will guide you when the time comes.
He uses the water coolers, boosting your will.
We can use the paper cup.
He also happens to be an archaeologist, which means that this is a technology that Wayne doesn't understand because it's too old. The cash that you receive can go to armors or grocery people. Every creature in this game has a familiar feeling. And with biological engineering, it's reasonable to assume that they were human or once were human. And that's because there's really no difference between you and them. Besides, a couple of BBLs. I can talk about this all day. Gibby is the biggest villain, the one who controls everything. Money exists in this game, and Gibby is the closest thing to a king. Through a system of capital, he controls everything, but none of that matters. Not to you right now, it's probably boring, and not to Wayne. This game is something that has to be experienced, and that's why it's my favorite game of all time. It's a result of all these different stories, genres, and music just blended together. It's so nostalgic to me because it reminds me of museum pieces, and speaking of which, it actually used to be in a museum next to all of these crazy sculptures. As someone who loves making things, this is everything I want to make. All the music in this video comes directly from the game, made by a man called Chuck Salamore. The first soundtrack isn't on Spotify, but it is on YouTube. The strange philosophy of Hylics isn't that it's a crazy experience, and it isn't that it doesn't make sense. It's that it exists, and that you can do something like that too. There's a sequel, and it's a completely different level of design, and just to put this into comparison, these are the running animations. So if this video does well, I might make something about that one, but it's a bit of a different one make.